color on WNBC-TV.
Hello, I'm Edwin Newman. Speaking freely today is Gattegno. Gattegno is an educational theorist and reformer, or as he might prefer to say, a student of the way people learn, and an advocate of methods that he thinks infinitely preferable to those generally in use now, educational methods, teaching methods, and learning methods. Dr. Gattegno was born in Egypt. Some of his work was done there. Some has been done in Britain, in Ethiopia, and in the United States. Dr. Gattegno, maybe we should begin with saying what it is you think is wrong with the methods of teaching that are now generally used, what I suppose we might call the traditional methods.
I really would like to say that it's only because we have not studied the question. But what is wrong, nobody is responsible for. Tradition has been followed from the Jesuit schools of Europe, and then amendment here and there when some question, some pressure came, say the sciences became important, or the humanities changed from the Greek and the Latin literature and philosophy to the study of the language and the literature or the country where the education was given. But slowly, until very recently, emerged people who called our attention to other problems. Comenius, Rousseau, Pestalozzi, Madame Montessori in this century, who have brought us to the realization that there were components to the problem of education, and we had to pay attention to them. Madame Montessori wrote a book about the child. She called it A Child, but she was only referring to children and how exciting and how important what they were doing was. We began only to be interested in children, in their differences, real differences, I think in the last 10 years.
This is if I may say so, if I won't be misunderstood, this is a very large claim, isn't it, Dr. Gattegno? In effect, you're saying that over the thousands of years of the human experience, it has never really been understood how people can learn and how they should learn?
I can say it has never been done.
Why do you think it was never done? You've said you don't want to blame anybody, but why was it never done?
Because life is so exciting. People today, for instance, are much more interested in what happens in the universities, in dissent, than look at children. And so why should you spend your time looking at what is hidden? And in fact, the difficulty comes because every one of us goes through it and succeeds in learning so much in the early childhood that it doesn't strike anybody as being exceptional, as being extraordinary. Because all of us do it, it doesn't strike anyone. You have to become sensitive to the familiar, and that's very difficult.
In other words, I say to myself, well, I did it that way, why shouldn't my children do it that way?
Not even this, because you wouldn't know what you've done. Let's say you want to learn to play an instrument. Your aim is to become efficient in the use of the instrument, not of what you're going through in order to become efficient. And this is why most people have a goal, an aim which is beyond what really needs to be studied in order to have education developed as a science.
Well, as I understand it, essentially what you're saying is that education, as it's generally accepted, rests on the memory. And because it rests on the memory, it is limited in a way that it need not be.
That's traditional.
Yes.
Traditional education had no other means. Since you were, for instance, to know what the Roman and Greek philosophers said or did, how could you know that except by retaining what was in the books? And all the Middle Ages and the Renaissance was based on the development of retention. And you were a great scholar if you knew how to quote verse and chapter about everything. While it is possible to see today that the accumulation of knowledge is defeating this. Nobody is really competent in the narrowest of all fields to take in all that is produced overnight and change his ideas and change his views because someone made an important discovery. The difficulty with knowledge is that it's now defeating its own end of being retained, and we have to shift from the accumulation of knowledge to the discovery of how people think, how people discover the truth of science, and try to give the students this preparation so that rather than knowledge, it is knowing that we have to stress.
Would you distinguish, Dr. Gattegno, between knowledge and knowing?
Yes, I think it's very important. One is a noun and accumulates. There is more and more of it. And knowing is a functioning which you can refine, which you can work on, so that your knowledge, which is the outcome, the byproduct of your knowing, is really yours, and you know first where the boundary is, the content, the intensity, the meaning, the significance. In a book which I have produced recently, where I studied particularly this question of the difference, how important it will be for educators to stress knowing rather than knowledge. And this is, I think, very easy to do once you have been alerted to it.
Dr. Gattegno, are you perhaps overstating the case against traditional education when you say that it doesn't prepare people for knowing, it prepares them, or gives them only the knowledge they can retain?
We have universal education, and we have a very small number of people who have criteria about what they say, who can stand on firm ground for what they think. They always refer to their teachers or to one or two authors instead of coming up with their own, the result of their own experience. In fact, I'm the product of traditional education, and many scientists produce trivial material, and very few scientists are those who influence science and the development of knowledge. But every scientist I talk to acknowledges that what matters in the preparation of future scientists is not that they know obsolete knowledge, but that they develop their insights into how the mind works in the areas where they want to enter.
Well, Dr. Gattegno, fundamentally then, what is your approach? Now, I know you call it the subordination of teaching to learning. Would you elaborate on that?
This is, from the technical point of view, a necessary statement. You will know that we have neglected one component in education almost entirely, and that is the learner. We have always thought that the students were there to acquire knowledge from the teachers, and therefore we developed an approach which didn't take into account what children brought with them. And we thought of them as people we have to test in relation to whether they have the answer that we have put into circulation yesterday or not, rather than build from the capacities that they have. And I suppose that one of the things that I can take credit for is that I've been struck by the demands that has been made upon every one of us by acquiring the native language in our very early childhood. And I can say that when we know exactly what this means, we are amazed that it was not noticed, that you, in acquiring the mother tongue, you have done so many things which say you are equipped in a certain definite way, and therefore we could relate to this equipment the ways of knowing that have been developed by humanity. Instead, we have neglected all you've done, and tried to teach you from outside, from above, and when we did not make sense of our nonsense, we were considered to be wrong. Nonsense, let's take the example of reading. In reading, we have inherited, someone decided one day to use the alphabet. To use the alphabet means what? That there are 26 letters taken from the Latin script, and we have given them values in English. The letter A is a name for a letter, has 10 sounds in English. And vowels and consonants, there are 4 S's, 1 in shore, 1 in vision, 1 in is, 1 in sat. The same letter has 4 values, and we are therefore offering children confusing elements rather than helping them to meet as they have met the whole of the mother tongue spoken by everybody in the environment and cracked the code of the spoken language. We give them a lie. We say these are the values of the letters. We even not notice that in order to speak of a consonant, some consonant cannot be sounded without a vowel. Most, in fact, can't. And if you say, it isn't really the value of the letter S. And if you say, what are you giving the children as a basis for their distinction? We do not present them the truth by giving them the alphabet. In another way, we teach them to look at whole words. And we say, this word, you should sound it in this way. Say the word ship. We say you have to say ship when you say this. And you think that boat and ship are 2 words equally good for description of something. When I show you this word, you say boat. The fact that children were making this mistake never struck people to question again the basis of reading on this approach of look and say, or whatever one calls it, which has been in circulation for 63 years now, or perhaps a little longer. Now, you have therefore 2 approaches to reading: the supposedly analytic with the alphabet, or synthetic with the words. And both of them are not, the synthetic makes you dependent on your memory and on someone else. The alphabet doesn't help you. So in fact, we had to start by looking at children. How can they crack the spoken language? And we all did.
How do they do it, Dr. Gattegno?
Well, to say it all will require very many volumes, but I will bring to your attention the following thing, that nobody has really ever seen an object from the same distance, the same lighting, the same angle. We move all the time. Therefore, the reality, the impact of reality on each of us is one of flux, is one of change. You have a voice, I have another one. All of us really are using their voice in communication. And children have to discover that something exists in all these voices which is part of what they want to send to us, which is called a word. Nobody heard ever a word. We only hear voices. And therefore, I must be very, very good at abstracting, at extracting from voices that which is finally the intellectual tool, the verbal component, and all the non-verbal components which give meaning, which affect me by the impact of the energy on my eardrum, which change my inner state of humors by recognizing that one is an emotion, the other one is a caress, the other one. All these things that we put in words through the voice are not in the actual written material. So as children, we have noticed that we produce our own sounds with our voice, since our ear is connected to our voice. When I say a word, I can hear it goes round the corner, and therefore I can establish in my crib a frame of reference for all the sounds and the voice that people make. And being prepared by this set of criteria, my sense of truth, which I never lose until it's extracted from me by forcing me to refer to others rather than to myself. My sense of truth tells me that I have found in the environment that what I can do, they are doing. I can recognize the components in the voice, and therefore I can reach that painting on top, that little crest, which is the word, which is the least significant of the means of expression and communication, but which will grow as we enter deeper, more deeply in intellectual field. But I therefore have a sense of what I'm doing. I can understand what you're doing, and I refer your speech to my speech. And slowly I recognize the existence per se of something that belongs to all the voices around. And when I do this, I have the courage, the simplicity of uttering words. And I utter what I think I heard. And you, my parents who are loving, accept the little I've given as a gift. And I'm encouraged to use that little. And as I hear what I say and I hear what you say, I hear the difference. And I work upon what I say in order to match or approximate as far as I can what you say. So this very elaborate process of production of what the milieu produces is done entirely by an observer in me, by a fine, keen, conscious learner who ultimately comes up with the capacity to say, like everybody in his environment, what everybody says.
You're talking here, Dr. Gattegno, about something you mentioned before, which is the things that children bring with them,
That's
on
right.
which you feel traditional education does not sufficiently build. If you could sum it up, and I know there's always danger of oversimplifying here, but if you could sum it up, what is it that children bring with them that you think traditional education does not use?
Well,
what are the powers?
In order to learn to speak, you have to accept, you have to own the capacity to encounter classes. All nouns are related to classes and not to individuals. A glass is a whole class. A car is a whole class. All cars are cars. Therefore, you have to be prepared to if you use the word car, you have to apply it to the next one. And so everyone is equipped with the classes. Since words are not always new, say the word tap is the word pat in reverse. The word pot is the word pat with a substitution. And I recognize this because, as a baby in my crib, because I'm learning in making them, so I have to be with it. So what children tell you when they learn to speak is that they are endowed with an algebra, the algebra of language, which linguists are still unable to disentangle fully. So if you come with me, being a man who can stress and ignore, since you have to stress words and ignore voices in some cases, and stress some component of the voice and not others. And you can recognize in make-believe on the first year that there is something called as a joke, that you can pretend. Now all this is telling me that every child owns a very high degree of abstract thinking, that he is endowed with an effective algebra which he uses not only as one algebra in speech but another algebra in the movement, so that he can decide what to do to get somewhere with certainty. Having fixed the goal, he can fix the route. Like taxi drivers in New York, if you tell them, you hail them and you say LaGuardia, from wherever you are, they arrange the routes of New York to take you to LaGuardia, and if you had said something else, they would at once provide you with another response. Now this equipment, the taxi drivers don't know they are mathematicians, but they are because they operate in the way a mathematician does in the field in which they are. So small children are mathematicians in fields which have not yet been studied by mathematicians, like language. And they are presenting us with a beautiful future for mathematics, since there is so much in speech that we have to learn.
On the basis of this, how do you then propose to proceed with the children once you've got them in the school? You would have them in the school.
Sure, when they are 6, they have already acquired a tremendous amount of know-how, and their knowledge, which is part of them, is not recognized as something memorized. You don't know your language in the way you know your history. You may have some doubts about history and you have to go to a book, but when you speak, your intention is sufficient to provide you with all the necessary resorts, and you bring in every one of your elements together. And when you hear what you say, without always saying it, there is a watchdog in your ear that says it's good. That's right. That's what I want. The order of the words, the choice of the words, the speed of everything. So once you have acquired, you have all this at your disposal. When you come to me at the age of 5, perhaps earlier, perhaps later, I don't know, and I am concerned with teaching you to read, well, I only have to acknowledge that you already have used isomorphic systems, as we say in mathematics. You have sounds in the ear and utterances through the throat, and they go together, they're different. You can see some things, and you can utter the correspondence. You can relate, therefore, different systems of grasp of the world, one to the other. And when you say, take French and German, you can translate from French to German, and German to French. Although they are different systems, there are connections which we may call an isomorphism, although it's not the precise mathematical situation with the case of language, which are more complicated than mathematical systems. So when you have this approach of the systems, then you say, on the one hand, this child brings with him a whole system of sounds and utterances, and I only have to give him a system of signs, which is a new code, but which is going to behave because of the mind. Once it's printed, it's static, but I'll scan the words, I will raise my voice, I will do a number of things when I look at these words. I'm all the time concerned with what he has. And if I can manage to give him the keys that make this new system an isomorphic system to this one, then reading is no problem. And that's why I say the problem of reading is solved.
Well, let's take an example. You have been teaching at a school in Harlem. You have been functioning at a school in Harlem. You don't really like the word teach.
Well,
so
I'm not there, really.
No, but your methods have been in use there, I should have said. PS 133. What is a procedure? The children come in, what happens?
My responsibility as an educator is not to theorize. The theory comes at the end. My responsibility is to provide a succession of steps and set of steps which will permit different children, unique children, to take the road from having cracked the spoken language to crack the written language. Therefore, I produced materials. I produced materials that look in the beginning completely crazy, because my first lesson is about the language of one sound, ah, and you work on ah for, say, an hour or 20 minutes. With ah, you learn the conventions of the written language, because you have no meaning to distract you. You are only concerned with the game that I put to you, and therefore you're going to be shown that once they are put on paper or on the board, you have to start from the left. You have to sound with a particular one. Say, if I use repetition with ah, instead of ah, I can have ah, 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 ah. And I call these words. Now, if I show you this in a sequence in a certain way, you can't. I will know that you're doing the reading as a decoding system, by saying what I have written. And since there is no meaning there, you won't be distracted. You will concentrate in saying or whatever I have put down. And they're all different as sounds. So very soon I can make you know that there are games, a sequence of games, which allow you to own these conventions which we have chosen historically differently from the Arabs or the Japanese, but once they're there, and I gave you all of them on one consonant, on one vowel. Then I introduce a number of vowels just to make, not to bore you. I give you a number of vowels, and once you have these vowels, I introduce a consonant as a consonant that says through a syllable. It sounds with a vowel. And therefore, if you have the bricks of speech, which are vowels and consonants, you are back to what you've done in your crib and later. Therefore, I can use all you have, and I use the algebra to make you say that ap becomes pa. And if pa and ap are merged together, you get pap. And if you substitute a by I, you get pip. And if you substitute by o, you get pop. And so on. So I'm using you to generate your own knowledge. And since there are criteria there which will not change, which will be true forever, then I have no chance that I'm going to misdirect you, and you'll have to do something else later to conquer this. So it is a system in which you move ahead by grinding the obstacles which are in your way, which in everybody's way. And so after you've learned to read the 9 signs and sounds that I have selected, I give you a kind of certificate of reading. You know how to read. You've cracked one restricted language. And all I have to do is to expand the restricted language to take all the sounds of English and then all the spellings of English. And finally, you are at the end of the first grade or in the second grade capable of spelling any word you can hear with probabilities like anyone else. And you must see these first and second graders, third graders in even kindergarten in PS 133 capable of attacking questions which we don't dare put to high school students. In fact, the many visitors that go there tell me when I meet them that they wouldn't dare do these things in their higher...
What sort of questions?
It is not quite the sort of question, but the type of material they read. Say, you wouldn't put to a child who 6 months ago couldn't read a book that contains 3 pages of continuous reading. And he goes, they steal the newspaper from the teachers to take them home. They are not satisfied with all they have on the shelves, they read in a few minutes. So the high school people who say we have to give them material, we have to give them subject, choice of subject related to their interest, so that we excite them to read. Well, these children read anything. I know a child of 5 who read just short stories and the Wind and the Willow, and even Romeo and Juliet in the Shakespeare books, because there was no difficulty in the reading, and had read for some years or rather before that. In fact, reading has been blown into a big problem because we based it on these 2 things: the lie of the alphabet, which is supposedly transformed into phonics, and the dependence of children. If you use their powers, even at the high school, it will be a matter of a day or 2 or say a week to be able to recognize the sense that has been put by the inventor of the written languages against the spoken language. And in why I say it's a very short time, because in fact what we have there is one more pair of systems: the spoken language, which you own and know how to use very well, and its substitute. And it is for speech that we write, for people to read. And therefore, all we need to do really is to create the bridge. And once you've understood how the bridge is done, then it's a job that you handle with all the powers you've had.
Well, reading has been described as the most important national educational problem, or failure to read, I suppose. You agree with that?
In a society that depends very much on the written word, it is like this. But we have to distinguish two things. It is true that there is a crisis and there is a difficulty. It is an urgent problem to solve. But it isn't a difficult problem. The solution exists. And that's really we have to distinguish these two things. When the jet engine was invented, once we had this that type of instrument, it took several years to build the planes that could be taken by it. So the difficulties are not in the engine once it is solved. Just in these two systems there is no difficulty. The difficulty is in the other thing.
Dr. Gattegno, suppose that your system were adopted, suppose it is adopted in some place. How do you measure the progress that the children are making? I gathered from some of what you've written that you're not much of a believer in standard tests.
Standard tests measure what the teacher does, what the Office of Education, the local Office of Education believes is important. It contains so many components, and it finally only makes the children fail. The test is not a test. In fact, only tests what it tests, and all the people who work on tests know that that's the case. It only tests what it tests, and you don't know what it is until you have got the results. If you want to know what children do, you can do it in a number of ways. Let's say I never tell you anything, except what you can't invent. Then anything you say has to be given to you. I have to grant you that you said it because I didn't say it. So one way of giving children back what they do is to make the teacher shut up. Silent. A silent way of teaching will help us know what children know. And most of my techniques are silent. I have an instrument which I carry with me, which is the most modern instrument. It's a pointer. With this, I can touch a number of words on charts and make sentences. I say nothing. They have to follow the pointer. And once they follow the pointer on an array of words, they have very little time to get each word. So if that short time defeats you, say if you came to see a lesson, you would say these children are performing better than I can do at once after so many years of exposure to the written page. And if they get all these words, which means that they have to get each word in turn, know which it is, hold it in their mind, conserve the sequence, and then say it in the speed of speech with the intonation that goes with it. If it's a question, raise the voice. If it's a joke, with the laughter in their voice, and so on. So you can say, you can have a continuous testing. Your finger is on their pulse. You know all the time what they do. And rather than give them exercise books where they repeat what I failed to teach them, or use the exercise to complete the task that was mine and I haven't been able to complete, I give them worksheets in which their own unique inventiveness, the problems that they have, come up. And they work on their own. And then when we look at what they've done, we can see that that's where they are. This particular child is. So rather than say, I disbelieve in testing, I have replaced a kind of test which is useless by a test which is molded on the particular child at a particular moment, so that you can be really informed, not to punish him or to reward him, but to generate a new set of exercise which will fill in. And I think that in this book, which I may perhaps mention, what we owe children, which is basing it, taking care of what they've brought with them. We owe them this recognition. Then our subordination of teaching to learning will take place.
Well, Dr. Gattegno, we've been talking mainly about your theories. methods as they apply to reading. And unfortunately, there isn't time to go into how they might apply to social studies or mathematics or whatever you think they do apply. But perhaps if you deal with the question, what must the teacher do? What changes your system would impose on a teacher who has been using traditional methods? Perhaps you could answer that question in terms of social studies or mathematics or whatever you like, so as to indicate how your system would also apply there.
Well, I work a great deal with teachers. I suppose I've met more teachers on earth than anybody else, and I've learned to cope with their problems, which on the whole come from the fact that they are given tools that do not correspond to the situation. It's as if I gave you a hammer instead of a screwdriver. You may find it difficult to unscrew one easy screw if you have the screwdriver. Now what I want them to realize is what I realized in my life, that we all have tremendous powers. The one that we have proved in our crib and later, in early childhood. Powers that had not been developed because in history we were more fighting for earning our bread until now, or fighting our neighbors, or for our greed, for whatever reasons. Now that these things are still with us, but more remote from the center of our main preoccupations, we can go back to ourselves and say, what has happened to all our powers? And if I can bring them back to you, if I can make you realize that indeed you are not only memory, you are not only what you have learned at school and that you most of it forgot, and you therefore think of yourself as not so good because you didn't have such good grades. But if I bring you back to the realization that you all day long use the same powers, you have not killed the baby in you. The baby is still in you. Every time you use your lips, it's the job that you did in your crib at the age of 3 months that you're doing. The action, you act on your muscle tone at this hour when you talk to me in the way you learned to do when you were 3 months old, because the muscle tone was there to act upon, and you could change it, and you learn consciously what can be done with one's lips. Now once you discover that the baby is still alive in you, that the little boy, the little girl, or whoever I'm talking to is still alive, with all that they have done and all they haven't done that they could do, that the adolescent in you has been the person who met within himself the upsurge of energy and could not cope with it. There was too much. And if we can cope better with our adolescents by making them realize how great the energy is that has been given to each of us, then rather than waste our energies trying to plug the holes of the sieve that our memory is, and instead use ourselves as we have been able to use ourselves as youngsters. Yesterday I had a man in my seminar who hated from his school life arithmetic. As soon as I put numbers to him, he was irritated and wanted to get out of my hands. Half an hour later, he was doing some mathematics that he never thought he could do. And he is one who's going to work with children. So many teachers hate mathematics because they don't know that mathematics is an awareness open to everybody, that we have the equipment, that the knowing of mathematics is not the knowledge of mathematics, that the knowing has not been used, therefore no knowledge has been produced, and the knowledge that was given was never related to the knowing that they had, only memory. And as a result, most of us fear mathematics, don't know mathematics, when everybody could enjoy it constantly. My little boy at the age of 3 could count, and he used to play with dice in different bases of numeration on call. He didn't mind it because it's so simple, it's so easy that a 3-year-old can do. All we have to do is really come back to the teachers and tell them, you have been the victim of ignorance, not due through the fault of anyone. It's because we weren't engaged in this research. We didn't know the radioactivity of the human mind. We were only looking at it as stones. Once we find the change of mental energy into competence, into capacity to generate, to create some of our knowledge, some of our possibilities.
Dr. Gattegno, the word that keeps cropping up in your writings is awareness. That's what you're aiming at, is it?
Well, awareness is what we all have. And in the West, we have not been as interested as in the East in this power of the mind. We have developed others a great deal, and awareness has remained one, marginal one. I know that when I speak in my seminars of the will, the Westerners shrink at the beginning, and then slowly they discover that, in fact, they have a will, that without the will they couldn't utter the words they're uttering at the moment they're uttering them. That to become aware of one's will is to enrich oneself of all that which has not been used. And so each teacher leaves our seminars charged not by me, but by the discovery that so much can be done. The hope doesn't come from indoctrination, but from the discovery that indeed a human being is involved in studying, in becoming aware of universes that follow each other like the peels of the onion. They cover each other, they don't lose, they are never lost, but they are, the outer one is the one on which you see, and all the others are there. And if you peel back the onion, you find nothing. There is at the end, there are only peels. Therefore, awareness has got that property of enlightening, of putting the light on experience. You are always experiencing, but the lighting differs according to what you've finished and what you're doing in. So every one of us finds himself in simultaneously in three positions, like investigating now, what matters now, having done all the things that one has done which are instrumental, and all the things that are transcendental which may come or not come. And if they do come, they become then the second stage. And there may be another transcendental, and what has been acquired, the past, is now richer, bigger, you can say, own mathematics or own the law in detail, which you didn't have at one stage. And it isn't in terms of accumulated knowledge. In fact, when we die, what disappears is not our knowledge, is what we were capable of doing that we haven't done. This is what is the loss with every one of us.
Well, I'd like to stay with that subject a bit longer, Dr. Gattegno, but it's impossible because I want to get on at least briefly to something else in which you've become very interested, and that is the use of television for educating. You think that the culture is in process of change anyway, that we're moving towards something called a visual culture. You think that television, because it uses the eyes to take in ideas, provides a way of learning faster and better. Now, why do you believe that, and what is the significance of it?
I hope it isn't a belief. I picked it up by watching television. Therefore, it's there for anyone to pick up. What is clear to me is that in order for you or for me to know what you've said, I have to wait till the end of your sentence. Therefore, I have to take time. And if I use my tongue, which is a heavy muscle, I have to use a lot of energy to produce the sounds. While if you take electrons, photons that reach our eyes and electrons that reach the screen, we have this capacity of, with the field of vision, to have our retina simultaneously struck from all angles. Therefore, you actually get an infinite amount of information. But because of the way we use our eyes and we scan and we focus and we have this global understanding, global in the sense of whole, not in the sense of earth, this global understanding of a field, plus the in-depth understanding through the capacity of focusing and orienting and concentration. In fact, it's man who invented the television set, and he invented it not only to carry the pictures of the outside in the home, but in order to provide himself for a respondent to the eye. When I speak, you hear. When you hear, I speak. When you speak, I hear. We have pairs of instruments that go together. Now, in the eye, there is no respondent. The television set is a respondent. Now, you can put something on television which will reach me in the way my eyes reach the world. And it will affect me in the way, which we haven't studied sufficiently, in which the world affects me through the eye. And the amount that I'm going to receive is incomparably greater than what I can scan word after word. But that is not sufficient. The medium itself has dynamics of its own, which is on our mind naturally, because we put it in there and we have to do all the programming in order to obtain the results we want on the screen. And I can obtain, through the use of the screen, insights for you that, in order to give them to you by speech, may require instrumentation and hours and hours and hours, and I won't be sure that I got it because the medium is not sufficiently refined. For instance, my pointer becomes entirely obsolete if I use the screen for reading. If I use animation techniques to provide with the transformations which I have to ask you to do, to beg you to do, while there on the screen they are done for you and with you. And once you know that they exist, because that's what they are, in a few seconds, then you know that they need to talk to you. The language of the screen will make you into a learner, and I'm quite positive in saying that using television for teaching reading will eliminate the problem of reading in the next 5 years. In the world, because we have enough competence in the world to put on the screens, and in fact, everywhere television is used. It's not that schools are everywhere, but television is everywhere. So it is a way of solving problems, educational and social problems, in a very short time. But moreover, there are so many other things that we can do through television. That's why I wrote a book.
How would, can you, I hate to say briefly, but I have to say briefly, how would you go about teaching reading on television? What, in fact, would be on the screen that people would be looking at?
I'm actually working on this, preparing the films, the units that will go on the screen. You can see that if there is a word on the screen, I can easily make by animation another letter or a sign come in and push a sign that's there, substitute it. So the word substitution is actualized there. I can make signs turn round and form a different word you can't deny because you say it happened. So as there is no dyslexia of the ear, means children don't reverse through the ear, you will not fail to know that reversal exists and leads to a new word, and you will watch that. And therefore you will be connected. But the animation will provide you with all the bridges that take you to over the hump. That means you have the new system.
Dr. Gattegno, you say you've written that with television it is possible to do very quickly, which is really what you've just been saying, what in writing it takes, for example, a large novel to do.
Yeah.
And that visual material can be comprehended as quickly as talk can be. Will there be any difference in retention of what is communicated, in grasping and remembering it? From reading, do you get a deeper knowledge, perhaps?
For us, perhaps, because we have done it for so long that we have learned to read in depth. But the visual element in a way poisons you. Let's say, once you have it in your system, you can't lose it. While what I say, the expression goes through one ear, from one ear to the other, as you heard that at school. Hearing is through a set of conventional signs. My words, if I say them in French, sounded terribly different. They are conventional. While an image, a reality, the raw material there is capable of reaching your sense of truth, your functioning, your organization, and remains with it. Therefore, there is no need for you to use all this complicated system of comprehension. You understand because it happens. You're poisoned by it, so the retention is of a very different character. That's why if you met me after I grow my beard and shave my hair, you'll still say that you recognize me. Because there is something, you don't necessarily take the two things that I've mentioned to be the ones that lead to the knowledge. You have so much information about it that you can ignore the changes and stress what is there.
Now, if you follow this line of reasoning, Dr. Gattegno, as I understand it, it gives you great hope for the future because you say that a visual culture is obviously the answer to the trend in which, and this is a quote, the meeting of complex situations is more the rule than the exception. Now, you're saying that we run in now to many, many complex situations. But do you think in our lives, in our national lives, personal lives, community lives, do you think that they will be easier to solve when we have a visual culture?
If a culture is taken as part of the individual's functionings, obviously. If a culture is outside, then it won't do. You have first to make it your own. If you are of the visual culture, that means that you have continued the development of your apprenticeship as a viewer, as a looker, as a man who uses his eyes, which develop with time, not anatomically, not physiologically, but develop as a tool for perception, as sensitivity of the visual. If that is part of you, no doubt, you will be much better equipped than you are today. We have followed a line that has made us into narrow specialists. The narrow specialist cannot use his powers, all his powers, to encounter the demands from a complex problem. While if you know that your mind is using infinities, then you don't mind having finite but numerous set of components. So you will be handling much bigger, much more complicated things. I'm working now on a book on the television and the computer, where this of course are tools of ours, man-made. They are telling us we are at the threshold of a universe in which we are going to be incomparably faster than we've been when we have used memory and words. And to cope, when we have solved all the problems of booking hotels and doing the matching of people and so on with the computer, we will still have to use computer for something else. Therefore, we have to find tasks which are indefinitely renewable and not to create new uses for it. So television with the computer will provide us with freedoms that were never exercised, that are not threatening the establishment, because they've never been codified and nobody has invested in them.
I'd continue. There's one other subject I'd like to get to, and that is what you call the revolution among the young, their desire to dismantle and rebuild the institutions around them. And you think that was inevitable?
It has always been the case.
Yeah.
We have all, at one stage or another, recognized that our energies were not used, that we didn't count with our positiveness. We have not yet produced a society which is relativistic, in which everyone has the right to his life, to what he is. So the fact that in our time we didn't know about the rebels, because we didn't have television, in my time at least. I didn't know about the rebels. I thought I was the only one, and an anarchist, and someone who didn't have much to contribute. But when you know that it is a claim, a legitimate claim of the young to say, look at us, what we bring to you, what we have to give, which naturally in the previous cultures, the cultures are still lingering around, we didn't know how to do. And now I hope that that knowledge which we have, which is the beginning, will give everyone his place. And I'm sure I know a number of things which are true, and therefore they are knowable by anyone. And since they are true, I don't need to push them. They will be found by everyone else.
Would you explain your use of the term relativity? You use that a good bit.
Yeah, relativity is with us since 1905, and it only says that there is one reality and observers. The reality is one, that the observers have been in relative motion one to the other, or being different because of their instruments and so on. They describe the same reality differently. So if you take two systems of reference, and if they are like this, they will, what this one will see and will not be what this one sees, if the angles and the positions, the observations are different.
This is what causes the so-called generation gap, is it?
Well, only this. I'm sure that in my life, I've experienced the generation gap only in relation to the older generation who didn't understand me when I was adolescent. But now I don't experience it with any group of children or of people at any level.
You do not?
I don't, because I am a relativist. I grant you the reality of your experience in the same way I grant it to myself. But I have to know what it is, and why it is so vital for you that you are prepared to be burnt or to burn yourself for it.
You think then, go back a bit, that television has contributed to what you call this revolution of the young?
Yeah, because we feel we are not alone. We feel that there is a pressure group now. I couldn't be a pressure group alone. I had to question you, and if your appearance in you was that you were sedate when I was not, I wouldn't come to you. You wouldn't be my friend. And if you were violent, perhaps you didn't want that much. And so we were capable of gregarious actions, but not constantly.
Thank you, Dr. Gattegno. Caleb Gattegno has been speaking freely. Edwin Newman, NBC News.